Yes. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Is the Right to Know part of your privacy thinking? Thank you very much for joining us. And I'm Christine Aykaç. I'm your host and also the learning strategist at Akuna Consulting. That's why we do custom training and certification trainings and so. But these participants are my close, not just a friend, colleague, long time, and we are together. And at the end, we will talk about it with Amalia. And I just published a new e-learning.
A new learning course, yeah.
Yeah, it is quite. Okay, Amalia, if you can go to the next slide.
Yep.
Yes, this is me. Let's move on to the next slide.
Let's just stay here for a little bit so people can understand
Oh.
how amazing you are. I think it's
okay, I'm blushing right now. Thank you.
So thank you to our host and
this is after this we have actually 2 more webinars scheduled. June 10th is about ITIL version 4 and collaboration, and June 15th is actually Thomas is going to join us to talk about the digital transformation, and he's going to give his new upcoming book is on digital transformation to participants. Yes, and then June 17, actually, I am talking about the learning strategies at ITpreneurs. We will add it to the list. And then June 22nd, 3rd is coming about DevOps transformation. All right, then I'm handing over to Amalia and Claudia. You guys go ahead.
Thank you.
It's got a little glitch here, but let's see if I can make the slides move. There we go. They did move. So today, folks, is about introducing to you a very key concept, but also a very practical, easy to wrap your minds around concept, which is the right to know. And what is this right to know giving all of us, whether we are consumers or we work in a company? Why is this right to know so important? This is our company, Managed Privacy Canada, where we believe that privacy can be beautiful. So in this day and age, consumers in particular, but also companies have privacy top of mind, and we're going to delve into that. I mean, yes, we have a pandemic going on, and there's so many other things going on. There's a lot of business disruptions, but privacy choices have really stepped up and are becoming top of mind. The first big company that has signaled a major shift in the market is Apple. They have released an update in their operating system for all the phone users, Apple phone users, to say, you know, from now on, you have a choice to opt in into any kind of ad tracking from other companies, other partners that Apple has. So that is a significant shift. And it's giving not just the other big tech the signal, but it's giving consumers the signal that they matter, that they're important, and their choices and what they want to exchange their personal information for or with, whom they want to exchange it with, is actually important. Then another major event happened, and we were made aware of this Facebook leak on the dark web. And I am not an expert in the dark web, and I'm just going to ask Claudiu to maybe talk a little bit about how significant this is.
Well, the dark web is accessible to anyone and everyone, and I mean, we could have held this seminar on the dark web if you wanted to make it cool. In fact, I do present a couple of seminars on the dark web. It used to be a really obscure and arcane way of interacting with people. And of course, you could get into trouble on the dark web, but now it's fairly mundane. It's fairly easy to browse it and to search it and so on, which makes the fact that there's so much information outside of the traditional Google search engine, which we call the surface web, it makes it that much more important. So if you find out that your company information is on the dark web, well, you can pretty much bet that it's accessible by anyone on the planet. There are free email providers that protect your pseudonymity, and you have a chance at being quasi-anonymous on the dark web, and you can join any kind of marketplaces you want and browse all kinds of wares from guns to drugs to whatnot. So it is a significant thing. It's no longer just a word, your data was found on the dark web. It simply means it's out there and it's within reach of anyone.
So it's an underworld of, at the moment, just going back to Facebook, of a lot of personal information that has been leaked. And why that's important and why privacy regulators around the world warn about this is that people reuse their information and credentials from Facebook to other accounts that they have, which has multiplied the opportunities for social engineering, for example, for people getting emails out of the blue telling them that their boss is asking them to do something and click on this link. So that's, to me, significant in kind of a letdown for consumers and private citizens. And then we've had the whole discussion around WhatsApp and their privacy policy changes, where now they're backtracking and they're saying, no, we're not going to remove certain functionality if people don't let us completely track them and invade their privacy. So, I mean, that's change is not instilling a lot of trust with the consumers. And a lot of the consumers actually jumped ship and went to other companies like Signal and Telegraph. And it's simply because they received the message that you've signed up for a certain service and now you're taking us for granted, taking our information for granted. And then Google, and then since I wrote these slides, Google came up with another announcement. So other than the retirement of their third-party cookies, the Android platform now, they're creating a privacy dashboard where you're going to be able to see what other third parties and other partners in the ecosystem with Google are actually attempting to take a bite from your personal information. And hopefully you're going to be able to turn those off. And then the U.S. Department of Justice is making a huge statement with an antitrust lawsuit against Google tracking, because they've been alerted to the fact that even in incognito mode, you are still being tracked. So what kind of trust can you establish with a provider if they're telling you to go incognito, but you're still actually visible? And then a major case in Europe with the Grindr application that actually had a number of privacy advocates partnering and revealing the fact that a certain third-party partners of Grindr were actually tracking and collecting a ton of sensitive personal information, incredibly sensitive, that but they weren't even admitting on their privacy notice that they're actually collecting that information. So it took a regulator to give them a huge fine to make them admit that they are actually collecting that information without permission. And of course, we have the discussions in Europe about the e-privacy directive, which is going to add a layer of privacy requirements on electronic communications. So this is kind of the landscape. The conclusion we draw here is that privacy is important to consumers, but more so, I think it used to be, there was an era where companies would say, well, consumers don't care about privacy. They just want these applications. They just want these services. They're so exciting. They're not going to care about the personal information. And what we've seen in the last at least 2 years, maybe with the pandemic, and I'll invite Claudiu to jump in anytime, is that actually consumers did say, no, we care. Privacy is important to us, and we're sick and tired of giving you our trust and our information for you to take advantage of it. Just wanted to touch on that one point of the Google do not know evil, because I remember downloading their privacy policy, must be 2012, and I was so impressed with their top 10 list or whatever it was on their policy. It was written in a very different way than any privacy policy I read, and one of their principles was do no evil. And then since they've actually retracted that, there's no more statement of do no evil. And that says a lot. Any comments, Claudiu?
Well, I think evil is so subjective that they decided to stop having those conversations and perhaps no longer allocate support staff to defending that phrase. So it was funny at the beginning. Afterwards, it just became a liability. And of course, they saw that it was being used against them. So it's no longer part of their mantra, not because they reserve the right to do evil. They just don't want to have that discussion anymore. That's all.
And then, especially in the last 3 years, there have been a lot of privacy advocacy groups that actually raised to the top, and they're becoming huge influencers in particularly in Europe, but not just in Europe. They are actually sending waves across the pond to the United States. And for some of you who have maybe been reading, there's been a recent actually article written by one of the US top regulators about the disaster with the data transfers between Europe and United States. Just to make it very short, because it's not simple, it's really a matter of privacy regimes and enforcement, where the EU has the GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, a huge accomplishment of the European Union to make a statement about privacy that has very strict requirements, and particularly about how data is being protected as it is transferred to others. And the fact that in the United States, that promise cannot be kept because of other legislation that is requesting this data from companies, especially telecoms and cloud providers. And these companies are subject to these laws, so they cannot refuse. Well, as as part of that, an advocacy group led by Max Schrems, an Austrian citizen, Noib, none of your business, has actually been raising the issue of privacy to the top. And then most recent, this idea of submitting complaints about certain companies that are terrorizing the consumers with cookie banners, and even the psychology behind how they're offering these cookies and the opting in or out is actually not making them opt out. So they are very upset about it, and they're starting to really lead the charge with the enforcement of GDPR on cookie and cookie consent. So we have some forces at play. We have regulators, we have the consumer's voice, and we also have privacy advocacy groups that are becoming very vocal, and they're not the only one. Privacy International is another one of them, and there's a number. So much so that companies are actually taking, paying attention And a lot of big companies, I was just in a webinar before this, Walmart, for example, they've created a vertical on just digital citizenship. So they're starting to look at how can we create more innovative products and services in a way that we actually respect the expectations of privacy from the consumer. So that's the landscape. The consumers are in the know. So they are now so much more aware of the right to know and what are the things they should know and what are their rights in general, the right that they give consent for some things, the idea that they have the right to know what you as a company hold about them in terms of their personal information. They are so much more aware and more vocal. And if they're not, these advocacy groups are actually vocal on their behalf. So what is the right to know really is not about knowing and reciting a privacy law or 5 or 100. Consumers do know about transparency and privacy choices. They know that companies, when they want to take information from them, they have to be transparent. They have to provide some privacy choices other than give us everything or else. And for that, in turn, to raise to the challenge and be transparent and be a good digital citizen, service providers need to clearly describe what information they collect, for why they're collecting that, how, what are all the rights that are being observed in the process of collecting that information and using it. Who can consumers contact if they have questions or complaints, or if they want to remove, withdraw their consent, or they want to stop that service? And how is their data going to be returned? And they also want to know where their data is going to be stored and with whom it's going to be shared. They are, consumers are aware that these are their rights. They have the right to know these things. I'm just going to invite Claudiu for any comment on this.
Well, my my key comment here is for consumers to always know what the enforcement body is, because it's one thing for you to have rights. It's quite another for you to have an organization that is willing and able to enforce or
Fight for you.
Exercise the authority to sustain or to support your right. And so, for example, you need to know that you have that capability here in Canada. You have the right to file a complaint with the Privacy Commissioner. Not many people do, but more people should, to paraphrase George Michael. And so it does make sense to be aware of the kind of environment that your data is being collected in, because we've got federal level enforcement and we have provincial level enforcement, not to mention other organizations that can address our right to privacy. Now, whether those enforcements are effective is a different matter, but I think more people should plan to call attention to their own right to consent, because and I think, again, to paraphrase someone, 130 years ago, Samuel Warren said that he has a deep-seated abhorrence of the invasions of social privacy, which of course led to that watershed moment when the Warren and Brandeis paper was written that changed the look of privacy around the world. And I know that's a paper that's near and dear to your heart, Amalia.
Yeah, if I interact, it was a very good point, Claudio, thank you. But I believe it's not just in Canada. Most of the countries, the Western societies, they have the privacy rules. And so especially in US, like us, there is a privacy state.
There are many privacy regulators.
That's it. So the fact is, there are just so many organizations that you need to not just know what the organization is, but you also need to know that very subjective aspect of the way that privacy is defined. because it's in that context that you need to file inquiries, complaints, and so on. So it pays to be a little bit strategic, because we are still in at an inflection point in the maturity level of today's organizations, and we will come through this, but I think it will be accelerated with the right approach, the right planning. You know, Amalia talks about the 7 Ps, of which I remember planning is at least one. And it's important to know that when you care about your own privacy and you do want to enforce your right to consent, to know which organizations are going to enforce that on your behalf, because they're at this point, we're no longer at the point where there's a shortage of organizations. Right now, there's an abundance of agencies and organizations that say they will do this. And so the least and the most that you can do is to put it in the right context.
Yeah, thank you. Great point. And yes, I know Amalia's piece. Yes, Amalia?
All right, so we're just going to move on. If the technology allows it. So to make it a little, more focused for organizations, Claudiu and I have come up with this model, quadrants. People love quadrants. And we thought about our experience with different organizations, and we kind of placed them in 4 quadrants that talk about the dependence on personal information and the cost of compliance, or the impact of negligence. And so this map really shows the kinds of organizations that are out there, and going from like small to mid-sized to large organizations, how much dependencies they have on personal information, and how much is it going to cost them to pay for negligence. And there are a number of practices that they can apply to handling personal information in order to come to this privacy safe zone. The greater the dependency on other providers, on information, the amounts, the volume and sensitivity of information that they exchange, the more increased risk they're going to have, and possibly the impact and the cost of negligence is going to go up. So it's very important for organizations to know their privacy safe zone, to know how they can handle the personal information, to maintain the trust, to stay within the limits of the law, but to also have the ability to grow their business. And there is a perfect triangle there. Claudiu, any comments?
So just taking a step back here with respect to this slide, because if you're going to take one thing away from this slide, it's that it's somewhat intuitive, but it's worth mentioning that the larger the company, the more suppliers you're going to have. The larger your enterprise, the more dependencies you're going to have on vendors and other suppliers. So your supply chain becomes a greater risk the higher up you go. And certainly the more information you store that doesn't belong to you, right? So personal information belongs to data subjects. The more information you collect, so this speaks against the idea of big data, for example, or non-de-identified big data. The more personal information you have, the greater the impact of a breach and of an event. So all that we're talking about here is creating a sweet spot in people's mind, which is this modeling exercise that we typically take our clients through, where we identify that sweet spot. That sweet spot is that circle in the center. It's your privacy safe zone. It says if you're collecting all the information you can, then you're unlikely to be able to secure it and protect it. That is a risk to your organization, it's a liability, and it's also an inefficiency because you suddenly have to buy more technology to house all this. So you're outside your safe zone at that point. It's worth understanding how you can minimize your dependence on personal information, and certainly it's worth putting the focus on just how many supply chain dependencies you have so that you can get closer to that sweet spot in the center.
So moving on from here, what does it mean for you? And you, we're talking not you as a consumer, but more you as a professional in your field, because you are working with data, whether you're a developer, you're project manager, you are creating a product or a service. You're creating a product or service based on data and information.
Did we lose the slide?
Yeah, Amalia.
Oh, going back? Yeah, you know, my clicking. No, I think, well.
Just go another screen maybe, Amalia, because it was there. You are on, should be slide 12, moving to 13. Just go slide 12.
I don't have a slide 12 here.
Scroll down.
Yeah, I did. I'm clicking on the arrows, and maybe this is skipping a slide. Let's just see.
Maybe because you complain about technology.
Maybe,
yeah,
maybe I got, well, no, actually,
there you go.
that's a slide. It's that's slide 11, and that's
well, you're using Zoom, so you know who's listening.
So I don't have another slide 12. I'm gonna go from current slide. Here we go. So, you know, we know that during the pandemic, a lot of companies moved on online commerce. They had to, they were forced because, you know, retail's walk-in stores were closed. You couldn't go in person. So a lot of companies have had this moment of, are we going to stop functioning as a company, or we have to go online? And the choice was clear. Every service provided was about an exchange of personal information, because they wanted consumers to buy. That's how they made money. So what we've seen in the pandemic is a huge increase in this exchange of personal information from consumers for goods and services. Did they think that privacy was a requirement? I don't know. But right now, we're a year and a half into the pandemic, and I think companies have created new business models, and they have to start really going back and realizing that the amount of personal information they're collecting, this exchange they do with the consumers, has to be governed by proper controls and data privacy handling practices. So privacy has to become a requirement and has to become part of the user story. And what are we giving to the user, bundled with, but we need to respect their personal information. So when you do that, you have to create privacy choice as part of functionality. There is no alternative to that, because remember, consumers have awakened to the right to know. They know that when they want something from you, they exchange personal information, and they have rights. They know about those rights. And so what we're finding, Claudiu and I, when we speak to clients, is that the development teams are the ones who don't know about this. For example, some project managers don't know that privacy is actually needed to be part of their requirements. It actually has to be part of the final product, whatever that is, part of their project delivery. QA and testing teams need to think about privacy considerations in the course of doing their role, their job. And I think, to me, the point for companies is that more personal information that they collect does not mean more value. It means more confusion and more risk. And I know Christine is very engaged here, because that's something we've been talking about.
Yes, yes. It's always important to keep it simple, short and simple. You know, more is not good.
In fact, I think even with this change that happened with Google, where they're saying, "Oh, we're no longer going to, track everything about you. We're going to this federated model of tracking." They've realized that for 20 years they've been amassing amounts of information that we can't even quantify, and they realized that not a lot of that information is really useful. They just kept collecting because it was an experiment. So more doesn't mean more value. And I think a lot of companies need to wake up to that and start realizing that we're crossing into an era of quality versus quantity for information.
That's why the term big data is no longer as sexy as it used to be.
So yes, because big data, as much as and data lakes and all of those interesting terms that companies love to use to show how important they are by having so much information amassed, it's really now becoming a liability. And smart companies, and we've talked to quite a few, they're putting rules around these data lakes and rules around big data, because they're realizing that it can really turn into a big risk for them. So are you part of the problem or part of the solution? That is the question. As a little wheel in the engine of a company, in your role that handles personal information or any other data, are you aware of what you need to do? So we have the opportunity to look into what other companies are doing, and Cisco has been really great at providing this privacy maturity benchmark study since there was been a few years now. And this has always been a metric that privacy has been privacy professionals have had a hard time kind of tying the importance of privacy to the impact in the business. Well, here is a metric here that there's 65% of the companies that answered that have delays in sales due to data privacy issues. Well, that's a big deal, especially now in the pandemic, when I think that the competition has increased with companies that are trying to launch new business models online. And there's a breakdown here on companies from all kinds of sectors, which kind of talks back to our quadrant as to how they've been winning or losing by employing or deploying privacy early on versus later. And we see like government and healthcare have had huge delays, and then financial services, and then moving up. So that's important. That's important to put in front of leaders and in front of people making decisions, to say, if we don't embed privacy early on, we're going to have so many weeks delay. And I know, Claudiu, it's the same with security. If security is not embedded at first, there's going to be an impact later on. And the impact might not be in sales. It might be even worse. It might be in a business model that is now not functional anymore.
That's right. So the thing that you're not told is that when you talk about privacy by design, the implication is that you're building that privacy from the ground up. To bolt it on afterwards takes special kinds of skills, and certainly it takes a lot more effort to add privacy in retrospect, and certainly to re-engineer it into your processes and legacy applications.
Here's another lovely visual that takes us to a country level that shows us in weeks the delays, the sales delays. And that speaks to the economies of scale and how important privacy has become for economies in terms of delaying their producing value inside the economy. By contrast, you can be part of the solution. So companies who have actually embedded privacy practices at all stages, including design, including thinking, prioritizing privacy, embedding it into business functions, embedding it into the discussions of new products and services, they've benefited from all kinds of metrics, such as, well, the reduction in sales delays, mitigating losses from data breaches, because the more information we collect willy-nilly, we're going to have more of a risk for that repository to be accessed by someone that shouldn't access it. The loyalty and trust with consumers has increased, making companies attract more investors. Well, if that's not a good, business impact, I don't know what is. And of course, enabling agility for innovating. The one thing I want to say, like kind of a little insight from me, is that if you know your data, it's like know thy customer. Know your data means you are faster at innovating because you know what you have. You know if you are lawfully allowed to use it, then you can use the data more. So that's one way or takeaway for businesses, how they can be part of the solution. In terms of like worldwide, from a country view level, here are some returns on investment by country that the world has seen, and that's significant. By employing privacy early on and by respecting that consumer right to privacy and expectation of privacy embedded into products and services.
Amalia, we have about 10 more minutes, and then we have some questions.
Okay, so perfect, to the point. What can you do? Well, you can align privacy with the strategic goals of your organization. And we're asking you, does your project include these requirements? Are you aligned with these strategic goals for privacy and for your business? Do your user stories involve these strategic goals for privacy? Because of course, what you're building has to be aligned with your business strategy. Do you test privacy settings and functionality? And one of my favorites here is, do you use learning sprints? So do you learn from maybe something you missed in what you were doing before, the step before? So these are some things that you can start immediately actually embedding into your practices. You can start questioning, do we have some privacy choices here? How do people go in and out? And what can they do? What are all of those whys and the right to know that we can actively implement? Anything from you, Claudiu? Any thoughts here?
I think the important thing to underline here is that privacy, as much as anything, is a story, and how you weave that story in your organization and with your supply chain makes all the difference with the effectiveness of your privacy strategy. So if you consider it to be a storytelling exercise, then you need to align that with your business goals and ensure that people are hearing the right suggestions, right? So when we talk to boards of directors, we tell them a completely different story. Obviously, it's always a true story, but we speak to them differently than we speak to IT and to developers and to administrative staff, right? So storytelling is part and parcel of a successful privacy program and privacy strategy.
And it's also part of the success of your business story, of what your product is supposed to deliver. So, and it's not just about that, widget or, lipstick or whatever you're buying off online, it's actually the full story is also about how you treat your customers. The practical side of it is you just have to ask questions. How can I do better? What are the features that I need to embed? How can I make this more clear to the customer? Do I need all these data elements for this functionality? It's a simple functionality. Why am I collecting and using so much data? Where's the data going? Do I know, or do I not want to care? Do I put like, glasses on top and just say, no, I don't want to know. So get to see the bigger picture, get out of your box, start to ask questions from your colleagues. Think outside the cool features. It's not, consumers don't just buy cool features, they actually buy trust and respect. And of course, how well do you know your customer? And that's it. We wanted to take some questions. If we, awakened any kind of curiosity, we have more to offer. Today was just like brushing the surface.
Yes, no, these are great, Amalia, because the first question is quite interesting because you have these workshops, and as Akuna, we provide them as well. If you can share your next slide as well, the third workshop, but we have a new workshop request.
Oh, wow.
They are asking, actually, are there any trainings, workshop that you offer on the privacy safe zone model?
Okay.
You guys mentioned it. It is interesting, something you guys should think about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like we have a lot of materials that we've produced in the last few months, 6 months, about this privacy safe zone. And we absolutely have workshops that we can offer on that.
Well, this is great. Yeah. Other question actually is related to, for medium to large companies, would you recommend they appoint a data protection officer? If so, why?
So this is very interesting, and I'll let Claudiu chime in, but Claudiu and I also teach a course at University of Toronto, and I'm not saying that to publicize it, because you can read on our LinkedIn. No, I am, because one of our students
just publicize it already.
Publicize already. One of our students, whom we had the course last night, asked exactly the same question 2 hours ago. So I actually did the research, and the IAPP, the International Association of Privacy Professionals, has actually put out a resource that shows how legislation is asking for different countries to appoint or not appoint a data protection officer.
Wow.
So, and it's not just about the large and medium and small companies. I would give the answer threefold. It's about how important from a strategic perspective privacy is for you. It's what the legislation says, and of course how large you are, because you may need an elaborate privacy program, so somebody needs to lead it. But if we just think of the principle of accountability that is in many privacy legislations, that alone says somebody needs to be accountable for privacy. Accountable means one person needs to have that hat of, I respect privacy and I embed privacy into my company. And then, of course, there's many responsible for privacy. Claudiu, another angle maybe from you.
So my only angle here is the fact that privacy needs to be effortless. If you're seeing friction, and a lot of organizations do, it's time to rethink it. It's time to go back to basics. It's time to come up with a model that resonates well with not just your business goals, but with your culture, right? Because that culture is critical in determining whether a year from now, privacy efforts are going to be a distant memory, or whether it's going to be a thriving part of your business that in fact gives you another competitive differentiator to extol to your clients and to champion. So watch for signs of friction, identify them early on, and see if you can address them up front. I like to lead, I don't want to call them committees, but I like to lead groups, discussion groups, where we talk to people within the organization at different levels and do A/B testing with different messages and different communications. It's worth exploring. And again, this harkens back to that storytelling angle that I mentioned earlier. Just have a discussion. In many cases, it can save your entire program.
No, this is great information. Thank you, Claudiu. Okay, Amalia, if you can scroll down to the Q&A slide. But the last question I have is, what is the best way to protect an individual's privacy while not impeding future innovations?
The perennial balance between, between opportunity and control. We talk about that in a variety of settings, and certainly it's it takes place a lot in government circles today, because policy has everything to do with fostering this this climate of innovation, and no one wants to be seen as squelching innovation. How do you strike the right balance? Well, you work backwards from privacy invasions, where you say, well, we have to draw the line at a lack of informed consent. If more organizations could do this, more organizations would be able to not include a privacy policy on their website as something that is not to ever be meant to be clicked on, but as something to be championed.
Proud of, yeah.
Or that's right. You should be able to say, hey, you know what? Welcome to our site. Check out our privacy policy. We're pretty proud of it. Right? Who does that?
It's a report card on your intentions. It is a great way to say, this is what my company, how my company respects you and your privacy.
It pays to be transparent, and organizations looking for a competitive edge don't necessarily have to launch a rocket to Mars to be different. They can simply show respect and be transparent about what they're doing with the information that they are collecting with consent.
Thank you. This is a great answer. And these are the questions I have. Amalia, if you can scroll down to the kind of last pages. Guys, thank you very much for all these good questions. And actually, for all webinar participants, we have a gift. Amalia, if you can go back, because we will share the recording with the participants. If you can continue, you will see one more.
Oh, yeah. There you go. That's the gift. Wow.
That's the gift. But for this explanation, I will hand it over to Alan. Alan, are you there? Do you want to talk about this Elite HR list?
Hi, sure. Can you guys hear me?
Yes. Loud and clear.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. Great webinar series. Thank you, Amalia. Thank you, Claudio, for providing just a wealth of knowledge on privacy and everything. Fantastic questions from the group. But Elite Agilist is essentially a virtual community tool that we've created. And inside of it, basically, it gives you a lot of great mini series, workshops, a variety of different tools and techniques and strategies that you can be able to get into it. So ideally, it's a wealth of kind of just micro sessions that you can be able to come in, and it's made for a variety of different kind of professionals. So if you're in leadership and you're looking to go ahead and learn a little bit more about emotional intelligence, and we have sections there. We have sections upon like servant leadership as well. If you're a Scrum Master coach, there's different techniques and strategies. A developer, or those that are learning more about just project management, there's some strategies, techniques, and templates. So it's basically a great community that you can be able to join us. The membership over here offers 3 months for free with the promo code. So no additional fees over here to give you an ability to kind of go in there and see. But as I stated over here, it does give you video tutorials, blogs, adaptable templates, and is basically meant to go ahead and help any individual in any type of organization, small or big, just to be able to get more encompassed, and we can be able to go ahead and hopefully drive agility as we start talking about it in all capacities. And we're shortly going to be hopefully including more information about privacy as well, with our definitely Claudiu and Amalia, who've provided a wealth of knowledge today for us. But I encourage everyone to come and go in there and tackle it and see what you guys think. And we look forward to continuing on these webinar series with Christine. Thank you everyone for joining, and I'll pass it back to Christine for any closing remarks.
Okay. Thank you, Alan, for the information. And again, Amalia and Claudio, it is really great. Thank you very much for all this information. Guys, we will share the recordings and also the all other related information with you. You will able to, get the connections with the Amalia, Claudio, any questions to them or to us, because, we work together and there's lots of good information also is coming. If there is no question, I will end the session. Anything else, guys?
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we are so happy. Thank you very much, guys. Have a great day. Okay, bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.